Thanks for making time today, folks. I really appreciate it. My name is Warren Wells. I'm the Policy and Plan Director for the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. Tonight is just a somewhat informal kind of advocacy update on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, just getting people up to speed, kind of blast through a lot, and then I want to leave room for questions and answers on the back end. So I actually have a presentation that I'm going to throw up the screen. Just one second. How's that looking for everybody? I see Danny giving my thumbs up, and I see my intern is here helping me out. Great. So again, I really appreciate everyone coming out today. I'm Warren from the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. I'm joined by, here, I'll just do a quick intro, then I'll intro my colleague here. So we're going to be talking about the background of the bridge and the path, talking about MTC's current proposal and their likely long-term plans, talk about congestion and emissions. That's super important. That's what people, that's, in the big conversation, how to actually fix congestion. Then we'll talk about, what the steps are, what the next steps in the process are. Like, is the pathway going away? Is it going to stay? How will that happen? And lastly, answer the questions about how you, as members of the public, can have an impact. So again, I'm Warren Wells. I'm joined by my colleague, Danny Lannis here from Bike East Bay. Really appreciate you helping get the word out, Danny. And I put together this quick presentation, but we'll be both answering questions on the back end. So so again, we've been working hand in hand with our partners at Bike East Bay, as well as Rich City Rides and Trails of Richmond Action Committee in this important work. So first, I want to also go through some kind of initialism and acronyms that I'll be throwing around, just so everyone's on the same page. You'll hear MTC a lot. If people don't know, MTC is the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. They are the Bay Area's MPO, which is a Metropolitan Planning Organization. It's an agency that manages, funding and planning for regions over 50,000 people, as the Bay is. They, in the Bay, manage the bridges, the toll bridges besides the Golden Gate, via an entity called BATA, the Bay Area Toll Authority. So that is the entity that takes your bridge tolls when you cross a bridge and funds maintenance of them, et cetera. So they're the ones who manage the bridges. That's separate and distinct from Caltrans, the last name on this list. They're the State Department of Transportation. They're the ones who own the bridges. So Caltrans owns all state highways, interstates in California. It's a little confusing, but MTC sort of controls what happens on the bridge, even though it's owned by Caltrans. And lastly, this is a really important group for our purposes here, is BCDC. This is the Bay Conservation and Development Commission. We'll talk more about them later, but they basically have a say in the baylands and up to 100 feet from the mean high tide or something, basically like the entire bay shore. So just to get those out of the way. Okay, so let's kind of run back in time. And there's a whole history here, which we're not going to talk about, but just to get people up to speed, here's the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. Goes between Richmond, the East Bay, and San Rafael in Marin County, San Quentin. Actually, I don't remember the year it was built, 64, something like that. It's 4 miles long. In 2019, for the first time ever, there was a bicycle pedestrian path opened on the bridge. This was the work of decades of advocacy and work from MTC. It took what used to be a shoulder on the upper westbound deck and converted it to a multi-use path accessible by people walking or biking or rolling, and separated by a heavy concrete movable barrier that you can see in that picture on the right. That was just before COVID, as folks may remember. There was a big bump in ridership at the very beginning, that summer when everyone was doing a bunch of riding, and it's settled into just in terms of usership of the bridge, somewhere between, I have another slide for this, somewhere between 100 and 150 people riding per weekday and 300 to 450 on weekends. There are a surprising number of pedestrian trips, and actually, I think this counter doesn't count people on the Marin side. There's a lot of people who fish off of it near San Quentin. So this actually makes it the most used bicycle toll bridge in the Bay Area. That doesn't count the Golden Gate because that is not one of the BATA-owned bridges, but of the others that you can cross on a bike, the Bay Bridge, Carquinez, Dumbarton, and we have the other one. It's the one that with the most bike crossings. You know, and as someone who rides it a lot, I would say there would paired with the opening, there was a lot of really important improvements for access on the Richmond side. The getting to the bridge from the Bay Trail in Richmond is kind of a breeze, and made a couple big steps forward in 2023. Comparatively, the connections on the Marin side are frustratingly bad. Once you get over there, you're sort of dumped out onto a pathway that is actually only finishing construction now. I'll talk about this later. And there's another project that hasn't even started on Sir Francis Drake. And frankly, it's a long ride. Oh, sorry. And it's a long ride. It's about 4 miles long. And so it's kind of a hike if you're not on an e-bike. But I do want to point out that it's used by a lot of folks who are not roadies, kind of despite the conversation around it. I live in the East Bay. I work in Marin. I cross it all the time. I regularly see people walking. I regularly see people riding, on a hybrid bike with bags on the handlebars. Not just folks who are roadies going across the bridge. And I will say, even people when I'm commuting to work, I might look like a roadie. I'm still making a work trip. A lot of people do wear what looks like recreational clothing when they're making work trips across the bridge. Sorry, I had a couple slides out of order from my presentation notes. It's a long bridge. This is it takes around somewhere between 12 and 20 minutes to get across, depending on how fast you're going. That's the background. What's the current proposal? For people who didn't know, hopefully people are a little plugged in. So what's MTC's current proposal? So I should say the initial, back in 2019, the promise was for a 4-year pilot. They were saying, we're going to do this and we'll see how it goes at the end. And I have some slides on that later. So the 4 years elapsed in November of 2023. We were kind of not sure what was going to happen. And then in April, we heard what MTC's proposal is going forward. So their proposal is to remove bicycle pedestrian access on the bridge Monday through Thursday and convert what is currently the path back into a shoulder, essentially returning it to the prior condition before 2019. Remember that barrier is movable, so it can shift. It can shift from one spot to the next. They're not taking anything off the bridge. They're just going to be. They're proposing to slide it over kind of against the railing and provide like a breakdown lane / shoulder on the westbound upper deck Monday through Thursday, and bring it back to provide a path on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They are saying they will provide a shuttle Monday through Thursday. Details on that are TBA. We're actually meeting with them next week to hear a little more details, so I can't share a ton there. The stated reason for this is that they want to pull it, so they're not adding another lane, so capacity would not be increased, car capacity would not be increasing, but they would be providing an area for cars to pull over during a collision or a breakdown, and they're saying, oh, we'll keep it on weekends because that's when most people are riding, as opposed to weekdays. Their plan is to move forward with this kind of ASAP, and we'll talk about how that can happen. In the long term, or the medium to long term, they have started an analysis to evaluate the feasibility of a third lane, an HOV lane on the bridge in that westbound direction. This is completing. The analysis would be complete in early 2025. It's clear from the messaging that this is what they want. That they're saying, well, evaluating several different options. They want to put an HOV lane on the bridge. That's pretty clear from the messaging. What's not clear, and we'll see from this analysis, is whether that would be compatible with even a part-time bike ped path on the bridge. Meaning that in the medium term, we're actually looking at the potential total loss of access, because if they decide, oh, we want to put a HOV lane on the deck and it won't fit with that barrier, then they might take the barrier off entirely. That is, I think, certainly a possibility at this point. So that's the medium term. And I just want to say, like, this has been, I think Bikey's Bay, and I could talk about this for a while. There's been kind of, I would say, two sides to the public commitment from MTC and Marin on this. Obviously, Richmond has done a very good job of providing access. In the plus side, MTC did fund both Bikey's Bay and MCBC to lead rides across the bridge. They funded a now since repealed e-bike subsidy for people who commute across the bridge. That was kind of on the program side. I think that was positive. On the infrastructure side, I think there's a little. They left something to be desired. There was a project that MTC was in charge of delivering to complete the pathway, like kind of the half mile on the Marin side, that they only broke ground on this January after the pilot was completed. If you look at the crash data in that section where this project had been delayed for years, it was funded in 2020. I think maybe Robert can correct me on that. Multiple people have been hit. Like, there was a long delayed project, long funded project. I don't know personally all the reasons why it took so long, but we know that people don't feel comfortable when they go across the bridge to the Marin side. It does not give an all ages disabilities experience. And I think it's hard to say that didn't at least handicap or didn't affect the experience people had running over the bridge. There's another project, this is not MTC, but Marin County, where they, to improve East Sir Francis Drake going past San Quentin to actually connect to the Bay Trail at Larkspur Ferry, that was funded in 2022, but county staff lost track of the money until we started asking what's going on with this project. And by then it was actually delayed 2 years. So they found it in an account no one was checking. So there's just been a lack of attention and focus on actually making this a successful pilot. And lastly, I think this is a frustration we had for a long time. The evaluation metrics were never clearly spelled out. MTC has said, they had this nice thing on the website saying, oh, well, we'll look at local traffic and bike usage and economic, social, and health benefits of the bike path. And now they're just like, well, not enough people were using it. We don't know what we never said how many we were trying to get to, but it's less than that, whatever it was. So we're moving forward to curtail usage. So there were never clear metrics, and whatever they were, we didn't hit them. So I want to talk a little about the metrics we do have. MTC did, working with Caltrans and UC Berkeley, conduct a study of the pilot with an interim in 2022, and they just released the final report. It's a long document. I'm just going to pull a couple things from it. If people want to dig through it, they're welcome to. This is the UC Berkeley PATH study. And yeah, this just came out last month. So I think that the findings are interesting. They show that, a couple things, that vehicle flow is down slightly, mostly because there's a shorter merge because of the pathway. Peak hour travel time is down a little bit, and congestion is the same. So that's certainly at odds with what you hear if you were to go on next door or hear certain folks talk about the bridge. But that's what the study has found, that the path has not made congestion worse. On emissions, which has been something that folks have talked about a lot, there is no finding that the multi-use pathway has increased air pollution in the city of Richmond. And actually emissions per travel mile in the westbound direction are down on weekdays and up slightly on weekends, but the latter may be due to more weekend travel post-COVID. So again, pretty at odds with what we've heard from some folks in the wider transportation world. And on safety, this was something that came up at a recent MTC meeting. It's clear that the presence of the pathway has not resulted in an increase in vehicle incidents. In fact, the rates of severe injury crashes on the upper deck are down, probably because people are traveling slightly more slowly because there's a narrower bridge deck as opposed to that open shoulder. And this is quoting from the report, there's no statistical evidence that bridge modifications are producing longer crash-related incidents. This is what MTC says they want to sort of study by converting the path back to a shoulder. But at this point, it's not. There is no evidence that there are longer incidents because of the pathway. So what causes congestion on the bridge? Like, how are we going to fix congestion on the bridge? The hint: it's not another lane. It's the housing. We could write a whole dissertation on this, but Marin has underbuilt housing for decades. This is a graph here on the number of units built by decade. On the left, you can see that there was a lot of housing built in the 70s, 80s, and very little since then. And in the last 15 years, rents and home prices have spiked. And I don't have a graph for this, but I looked this up. Super commuters to Marin in the past 20 years have doubled. People traveling over 50 miles to work have gone from 8,000 to 16,000 with people commuting to Marin. So people keep getting priced out, and they keep driving back because there are well-paying jobs there from Solano and Contra Costa County. And if we add another lane on the bridge, a couple thousand more people get over the bridge every morning, but congestion is not going to get any better. And we hear this from employers. Employers say, "Oh, we can't hire people. Say no to job offers because the traffic's so bad." Well, if the traffic is better, people will start saying yes, and then what's going to happen to the traffic? So just glossing over that real quick. So I want to talk about BCDC, and then we'll have about 35 minutes for questions if people have them. So BCDC is the Bay Conservation and Development Commission. Again, I kind of forgot the year they were started, in the 60s. The purpose was to sort of stop the city by city effort to fill the bay. It was kind of looking like the bay might actually just be a river and we lose the bay entirely. So they were created by the state. They were the nation's first coastal management agency. They have a staff, a full-time staff, and they are managed by 27 commissioners who represent who are across the bay. And so I shouldn't have on the slide yet. So their jurisdiction is the Baylands and the immediate bay shore. And interestingly, because this bridge crosses over the bay, they are a permitting agency for this effort. They, like MTC, had to get a permit to put the path in the first place, and to modify it, MTC is asking for a permit amendment from BCDC. So they are the agency that will give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to that proposal that I described earlier, converting the path from 7 days a week to 3.5 days, three days a week. So that those 27 people, they're the ones who matter at this point. MTC has, both staff and board have said, yes, this is what we want to do. This is our request. This is our proposal. BCDC is the last agency to sign off on that request. So they meet twice monthly. They meet on Thursday afternoons. And this will be coming to them. It's not actually clear exactly when, probably sometime late summer, early fall. And so this is the slide that I want to talk about. What's interesting is, unlike MTC and BCDC have different mandates. MTC is focused on transportation, it's in their name. BCDC has several main goals. Again, it's stopping further bay fill, but also they have a goal of providing maximal feasible public access to the bay shore. That usually consists of, in their words, pedestrian and bicycle and other non-motorized forms of movements. That's what they're thinking about in terms of maximal feasible public access. And if you look at their guidelines for what that looks like in the case of highways and roadways, you're supposed to provide pedestrian and bicycle facilities adjacent to highway and roadway projects to promote alternative modes of transportation. So this is the lens that those 27 commissioners should be looking at this proposal from MTC. They're not saying it isn't. Their goal is not to alleviate traffic. It is to provide maximal feasible public access. So because of that, and because this meeting is really where the fate of the bridge path will be decided, we'll be asking people to show up in person to their meeting. It happens in downtown San Francisco, or provide Zoom comment or write an email, depending on what is in your capability or free time. Yeah, so this is what the Zoom meeting of BCDC looks like. And how you can do that is you can get on the mailing lists for both Bike East Bay and Marin County Bicycle Coalition. I'll drop these links, or Danny or I will drop these links in the chat. So Bike East Bay has a campaign page. Danny, you can correct if I put the wrong link in there. Feel free to put the right link in there. I was just doing this on my own. And MCBC, we have a Google group. You can also get on our mailing list. I'll put that in there too. But I send kind of more wonky emails out to the Google group. You can also email a commissioner. There's one of them. There has 27 members. They include supervisors from each of the 9 Bay Area counties, as well as council members from a few different cities on this list. You can find their emails on this page. I'll drop that in the chat as well. Our talking points here, and again, I don't have time to go through our whole strategy. I just want to give a very quick gloss, and people can dig into this in the questions. Are basically that this would represent a huge rollback of the Bay Trail. The Bay Trail is this decades-long project to ring the Bay in a multi-use path. This would represent a loss, at least 4 days out of the week, of over 4 miles of Bay Trail, which is more Bay Trail than has been built in the last 6 years combined. That's pretty meaningful. We believe that the current state of the path is one that provides maximal feasible public access, and 3/7 of that would be less than maximal. MTC again has said that they want to provide a shuttle. We appreciate that. That's better than not. But at the last BCDC meeting, actually, BCDC staffers said, yeah, there used to be a shuttle that ran over the Richmond-San Bridge. It didn't get used, so it was discontinued. They pointed out that people, don't use shuttles, can't rely on them. Even if you did run a shuttle across the bridge, it would at best be coming every half an hour. It's not, which is more time than it takes most people to get across the bridge. So it's not something you really rely on or plan around. The proposal, if you just look at taking out those Monday through Thursday trips, you're losing 20,000 bike trips across the Bay every year. And importantly, this proposal is opposed by over 70 Bay Area environmental, social justice, and transportation groups, which were joined in a coalition letter that Bike East Bay wrote and facilitated. So that was 20 minutes, but it was as quick as I can go. And I really want to thank all of our partners in this, and I will open it up for any questions. If you want to raise your hand or put a question in the chat, this is kind of open format at this point, and we'll do our best. And if it's a question that is kind of digs into the weeds, I may say I have to get back to you. But thank you all for showing up, and I hope this was helpful. And I see Corey, I see your hand up. You're first in the queue.
Great, thank you so much, Warren. I work for the West Contra Costa Transportation Commission, and although I'm here as just a private citizen tonight, however, MTC did present their proposal to the CCTA board, which is Contra Costa board earlier this month, and they're going to be presenting at WCTAC, West Contra Costa Transportation Commission, on Friday at 8 p.m. or I'm sorry, at 8 a.m. At El Cerrito offices. It's also available in a hybrid meeting with Zoom. And I'm actually curious to see how it's going to go. The city of Richmond has passed a resolution supporting the bridge, and they're My board is made up of city council members from each of the 5 cities in West Contra Costa County, as well as the 3 transit agencies. So Richmond, San Pablo, El Cerrito, Hercules, and Pinole, and then Westcat, AC Transit, and BART. Richmond passed a resolution supporting the path. The members of my board that also sit on CCTA are from Pinole and El Cerrito. And when CCTA presented, they were more or less supportive of MTC's proposal. So it's going to be an interesting meeting. See how it goes. I just wanted to let people know that that was just another public meeting that was happening about this.
Thank you for that, Corey. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I should. And Corey, this was just an informational item. Like the WICTAC board is not. There's no action item, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. There is also tomorrow evening. And Carrie Schulman was asking if you could put that meeting in from the chat. If you can do that, Corey, I appreciate that.
We have the meeting announcement, and we also have the presentation materials that they're going to be presenting.
Great, thanks. And tomorrow evening, actually, the Transportation Authority of Marin, which is kind of our analog over in Marin, will be hearing a similar presentation from MTC staff. Again, no vote being held, just an informational update, but one where people could give public comment. And I'm sorry, actually, before we go to Roger, Danny, I should have offered to let you add anything. I'm sorry for not handing it over to you at the end of my spiel. Did you want to add anything on behalf of anything that I missed from Bikies Bay?
No, fantastic work. Thank you so much. I did want to say just that there's several questions on the chat. We'll get to them if you want to pause at some point and tackle those.
Great, let's do that. So I'll go to Roger, and then we'll start going through some of the questions in the chat. So Roger Marquis, if I'm mispronouncing your name, I apologize.
No problem. I had a question about Caltrans, Deputy Directive 64. It seems that DD 64 was created for exactly this sort of situation, but it's being basically ignored. So assuming the path is shut down, do we have any recourse in initiative, referendum, or legal action to get DD 64 enforced?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm familiar with DD 64, and again, it's kind of like one that has been. So DD 64 is a Caltrans Complete Streets or their deputy directive. I don't know of any instances of, and there's actually some older law kind of governing Caltrans or like supposedly governing Caltrans, like the 2000s. Have to dig up what the actual law is, the vehicle code is, where they're supposed to provide access on parallel routes. I don't know of any instances of people suing Caltrans or like using this to force their hand. So it's a good question. I don't know the answer, and we have to. It's a good idea of something to dig into more. So I appreciate that. I'm just gonna start going through. Looks like Tom has a comment. Let's see. Just looking through the chat to see if there are any other questions here. It looks like it's more of a discussion.
There was a question from Denise.
Yeah, asked if they have any data to justify their decision. So this is like, again, like I want to be fair to everybody here, right? Like if you drive across the Richmond-San Bridge for work in the morning, it's rough. Like it's a very, very long drive. I have done it a couple times. I have a coworker who lives in El Cerrito and drives to Marin, and he gives me a hard time about it. Like I realize that is not an easy drive, and when there is a collision, it does make things worse. Because like there isn't a shoulder, so you can't pull a damaged car into the shoulder, so you go down to one lane. Like that's clear. The question is like whether the benefit of the occasional benefit of that is on balance worth losing bike ped access Monday through Thursday, and that is a decision that that's a decision that our electeds have to make in light of the roles of their agencies and duly passed laws of the state of California. I don't think that they have they haven't been shown any data to justify this. They have said we asked, well, so how often do these collisions occur? what sort of additional delay do they provide, do they cause? And MTC staff's response was, well, we're not really sure. And that was like, I don't know, as a former planner, that was somewhat frustrating to me because, you know, if you're doing a cost to benefit model, you need to know what the benefit is and not just the cost. They are saying, well, we need to convert it back to a shoulder several days a week in order to get that data. I mean, maybe I wish they had done more of a before survey, I guess, before starting this in 2019. So kind of to answer your question, no, it's kind of like they're using this as a reason. I would say the charitable interpretation is they're using their proposed change as a way of gathering more data. The less charitable interpretation, and you know, people can feel different ways, is that, you know, we're kind of having the pie again. This is the new. The last compromise was we added another lane on the bottom deck and added a bike ped path on top deck, and now the new compromise is we're having the half. And I think, you know, going back to what I said earlier, I think that, you know, the medium to long term plan from MTC is to add another lane on the bridge, and I don't know that is compatible at all with the path barrier. It's a 36-foot wide deck. You have to tighten the lanes down a fair amount, especially with transit vehicles going over it, to keep the barrier on. So we might be looking at elimination of the barrier entirely. Let's see. I just put those. Which of the counters are working? I have no reason to think the counters are not working. That said, I've never gone out there and like done a hand count to verify. So I know they do maintenance on them. There have been times where they have stopped working. Like I check the counter, I check the website fairly frequently. And like if they go to 0, I email staff and they go up from 0 again. So I don't have any reason to be suspicious of the figures. And if you look at, like, for instance, you can look at the Strava counts across the bridge. And if you ever saw a time when like Strava was more than the counter, that would be room for suspicion. And that's not the case. Strava is like between a third and half of people crossing the bridge at a given time. I think last time I checked, maybe a quarter. Could you put the meeting into the chat? Great. Just looking at the chat here. I don't know if there's a plan to replace the bridge. Robert Muzzy asked if there's a plan to replace the bridge. I think from reports from MTC that I've heard, if they're, you know, in these presentations, they've said the bridge is in, like, I mean, I don't know, there were pieces falling off of it like 6 years ago, but they said it's in decent shape and there's not any immediate plan to replace it. The design alternatives analysis that they're conducting now, that MTC is conducting now, that's what the effort to look at the feasibility of a third lane, that is going to include like structural analysis of the bridge and how much like hardening the bridge would need to add another lane of cars, which if you think about it, is like thousands of tons of weight if you know, have both the barrier and a whole line of cars from, you know, San Quentin to Richmond. Should you see CBC, Vikings Bay, MCBC when we email the commissioners? By all means, that would be great. You're welcome to do that, but it's not required. Has the option to put a movable barrier on the upper deck and lower deck been considered? I would say that's been floated. I don't think I'll just say, frankly, no one's gonna do it. For one thing, it would be very expensive. Like it would be like MTC doesn't want to maintain bike ped access so much that they're going to spend another $15 or $20 million making sure it's 7 days a week instead of just 4 days a week. So, you know, it would be a whole effort to put another one on the bottom deck. It is feasible. Like there's room to come on at San Quentin and get off at Point Richmond. But again, it's expensive. And then also it's adding another like several thousand tons of load to the bridge, which then becomes, you know, another challenge. So it's been considered. I've been told, like, in a frank conversation with from MTC staff being like, we're not doing that. So
Worth mentioning to add to that is that at this point, the proposal includes in making the third lane, which used to be a shoulder on the bottom deck, permanent for vehicles.
yeah, that's a good point. I kind of glossed over that, Danny. Thank you. Yeah, it's just a comment from Carl. Sorry, I'm just reading Mark Headland's comment here. So Mark, do you want to ask your comment? I'm trying to read it here, and my daughter's kind of squawking in the other room.
It's not a very helpful comment for the current conversation, so let's skip it.
Sounds good. Are there any safety? Carrie asked, "Are there any safety concerns about having a movable versus permanent barrier?" I don't think so. Would a permanent barrier do a better job? I don't think so. I mean, it's a very heavy barrier, and it's each piece is like hooked together, kind of knitted together with the next piece. Again, I ride over it frequently. I can see places where drivers have run into the barrier, and it's never displaced more than, like, I don't know, 6 or 12 inches. Obviously, like a tractor, like a box truck could roll over it, but that would be the case with a K-rail as well. I don't think that, like, I think the barrier itself, I'm very comfortable riding along next to the barrier. I don't think it's you would have, yeah, it's not gonna, if you're in danger, it's because someone's tipping over, or, like, I don't know, throwing a bottle at you, not because the barrier is not strong enough. Has there been discussion for funding of a bridge side path, a la the one for the Bay Bridge East span? Again, nothing serious. I mean, nothing at the, not anywhere as close as the amount of work has happened on the Bay Bridge span. Like that, we have rough cost estimates for, and, like, conceptual engineering. No one has talked about it for this bridge, and frankly, like, yeah, it would be so much like the Bay Bridge span bike path is already such a heavy lift for one that would get used by a ton of people. Like, there is a lot of latent demand to get to San Francisco. I think it would be like the cost benefit of that is already, like, challenged by its opponents. I think the cost benefit of such a structure on the Richmond-San Bridge would be even harder to fund. Dave Traup asked if there was a structural analysis. I kind of mentioned this. Like, I think they're doing some of that in this current effort that is underway now, the design alternatives assessment, which will be done next January. So, and Roddy Paul asked the key question: do we know which BCD meeting we will make public comment at? No, we don't. MTC, it's just like, I don't know how long it'll take their staff to write a report. MTC has made the request of BCDC. It just depends on how long it takes BCDC staff to write the staff report and bring it and put it on the agenda for the BCDC board. MTC has said in the Richmond Side article that came out today that they are expecting they're hoping to go to the BCDC board by September. So that's in line with what we had heard earlier in the year of, like, late summer, early fall. So we'll know. I think they put out preliminary agendas. Do you know that? Do you remember that, Danny? So I think we'll know at least, like, a week to 10 days ahead of time. I remember Bruce, like, giving us a heads up about, like, a preliminary agenda before the formal one had been published. So the key thing will be to get on the MCBC or Bike East Bay mailing lists that we put in the chat earlier, and we will, if you want to know, if you're on there, you'll be the first to know when that date is set. Anything to add on that, Danny?
At the moment, the estimates is around September. We're looking at having that meeting if everything is fast-tracked.
Yeah.
That's not to say that we shouldn't do anything in the meantime. We definitely should be very present everywhere we can make comments and promote 24/7 access to the bridge, because I believe the decision is going to be made way before the meeting takes place.
Yeah, and there was, sorry, thank you, Danny. There's a little discussion in the chat, which I think is worth kind of talking about, like the traffic is bad, traffic is worse when there's a crash. That is always the case. The question is, like, how much worse is it because there is no shoulder as opposed to shoulder there being a shoulder before? MTC has not answered that question, and this is not to say there isn't any difference. They just have not answered that question yet. And as Robert pointed out in the chat, that like serious crashes are down. So like it might be the case that a given crash would have a longer period to recover from, but crashes might be less frequent. And I don't know, then it's kind of a question of like, what do you want as a driver? Do you want, what do you want the worst days to be worse or the normal day to be better? I couldn't come up with the name of the Carquinez Bridge. Sorry about that. There's some conversation in the chat that I'm not really able to follow. Someone's asking, could one sue MTC under CEQA? Sorry, my daughter's here in the room shouting. Make them submit to an EIR before closing the bike lane. So, good question. I've asked a lawyer this question, and the answer is probably not, because of the nature of this being a pilot project from the beginning, that it probably I wanted to answer the same question. It probably wouldn't. It's not an impact under CEQA to remove the path, return the path to its original state that was intended as a pilot project. That was what, maybe we get a second opinion. That was what the CEQA lawyer who is on like pro bono retainer for us at MCBC had said. To do the permanent project that MCC wants to do, to add an HOV lane on the bridge, they will certainly have to do an EI, or at least go through environmental review to do that. And because of laws because of SBs, I can't always remember my SBs. Increasing vehicle miles traveled, increasing driving is now an impact under CEQA. So if they do add an HOV lane and it is ruled that would increase VMT, and they have ways of kind of like squirreling away from that, then they would have to provide some sort of mitigations. What those mitigations would look like, we don't know. That's all kind of several years in the future. This near-term proposal, I don't think that CEQA is. From what I have been told, CEQA is not going to be a recourse, unfortunately, or whatever. That is the case. I don't think we know the BCDC staffer who is assigned to work in the permit yet. I believe, actually, I don't know this for certain. I should email Lisa at MTC that BCDC has submitted the permit application to the MTC has submitted the permit application, but I don't know that for certain. I haven't seen it with my eyes. They voted to make that request back in May, so it's very possible. Mark Seedall was asking, do we know what type of BC permit authorizes the bike path on the bridge? I'm not sure what you mean, what type of BCDC permit. I'm not a BCDC expert, so if you want to add any clarification on that, feel free. Rodney was asking if we've been in touch with BCD commissioners to find out which ones are likely to support keeping the path. Great question. The answer is yes. We have actually reached out to all of them at this point, and I've started to hear back from a few to try to schedule just some meetings, some face-to-face meetings, answer their questions, because again, like there is a lot of misinformation floating around about the bridge, and I want people to understand like the correct record. So I don't have a great sense of how close we are to having the 14 we need. Actually, it's less than 14 because it's a majority of however many are there that day. which makes this kind of an interesting question politically. There are 27 people, so a quorum is 14. So in theory, you could have a day where only 14 people show up, and you just need 8 of them to vote in favor. I think, and Danny actually looked at how many people typically show up to the BCDC meetings, which I don't often follow. It's usually somewhere in the 20 range, right, Danny?
Correct.
So, on a given day, and then it matters like who shows up. Do all the people who support the pathway show up, or do all the people who oppose the pathway show up? So you need, somewhere between 8 and 14 votes, depending on how many people are there. But we are reaching out to BCDC commissioners just to try to make sure that people kind of understand the facts of the issue. Has MTC prepared a CEQA document to support its BCD permit application? They don't need to for this. Bruce, sorry you were late. I am recording this, so we'll post it if you want to watch the beginning. So no need to apologize. I think I'm not seeing any more questions. Any other questions that people have? I think I've answered all of them in the chat. If I missed something, feel free to raise your hand. I think I've gotten everything. So if there are no further questions, I think we will call it for the evening, but I'll put my email in the chat. It's just warren@warrenbike.org. I really appreciate everyone turning out. Thanks for the great questions. Again, the key ask is to get on the at least one of the MCBC or Bike Use Bay mailing list, so you can stay in the loop about this and engage however you are able to. We really appreciate everyone's interest, and again, please stay in touch if you have any other questions. We're here to answer them. And so thanks for everyone for coming. Thanks to our partners at Bike Use Bay for helping out with this. Really appreciate it. All right, night everybody.